The crystalline spires of Nexus Prime gleamed under three suns as Ambassador Lee Hanna stepped from her transport pod onto the platform. The metal beneath her boots hummed with alien energy, and the air itself seemed to shimmer with different atmospheric compositions mixing together. Her polished, diplomatic uniform contrasted sharply with the exotic forms surrounding her beings of gas and crystal, metal and flesh, all converging on the great assembly hall like a living river of impossible diversity. Captain Park Jun-ho, of her security detail, fell into step beside her, his hand resting casually on his plasma sidearm. The weapon looked primitive compared to the energy shields and quantum disruptors carried by other species' guards. But Hannah knew it had saved human lives more times than she could count. "Ambassador, our intelligence suggests this isn't a routine session," he murmured, his eyes scanning the crowd of aliens flowing around them. Hannah nodded grimly, her jaw set in determination. The emergency summons had come without warning, transmitted simultaneously to every human colony across the galaxy. Earth's orbital stations, the mining colonies of the asteroid belt, the terraforming projects on Mars all had received the same message at the exact same moment. The speed and coordination required for such a broadcast spoke of serious intent. She watched as a group of methane breathers drifted past, their transparent bodies glowing with internal bioluminescence. Behind them, a delegation of silicon-based life forms moved with mechanical precision, their crystalline structures catching and reflecting the light from Nexus Prime's three suns. The diversity was staggering. Some species she recognized from diplomatic briefings, others were completely unknown to human science. "Look at them all," Jun-ho whispered, his voice tight with tension. "It's like they're gathering for a trial." As they approached the entrance to the great assembly hall, Hannah felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. Some species communicated through pheromone releases that made her translator implant buzz with fragments of conversation. Others used quantum entanglement networks that bypassed traditional communication entirely. But the message was clear in every language. Humanity was the topic of discussion today. The Great Assembly Hall itself was a marvel of engineering that defied human understanding. The structure seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously, its walls curving in ways that shouldn't be possible. Gravity flowed in different directions depending on which species' seating area you approached, allowing creatures of vastly different physiologies to coexist in the same space. Now, as she entered the vast amphitheater, Hannah understood why the emergency session had been called. 847 alien species filled the tiered seating, their attention focused on a single chair at the center hers. The chair looked impossibly small and fragile, surrounded by the massive forms of beings who had been traveling. The stars, when humans were still discovering fire, the air thrummed with the sounds of 100 different languages. Clicking mandibles, harmonic frequencies, electromagnetic pulses, all blending into a symphony of alien communication. Hannah's translator implant worked overtime, feeding her fragments of conversation that made her stomach tighten with apprehension. "Mammals think they belong here," chittered a voice that sounded like breaking glass. "2 centuries in space and they believe they understand the galaxy," hummed another, his tone dripping with condescension. Elder Vexari of the hegemony rose first, his 6 arms gesturing dramatically. The ancient being stood nearly 12 feet tall, his exoskeleton scarred from countless battles across the millennia. His species had been rulers of star systems when Earth's sun was still forming from cosmic dust. "We gathered today to address the ... problem of humanity," he announced, his voice carrying across the amphitheater with the authority of eons. His words triggered a wave of chittering, buzzing, and harmonic laughter from the assembled delegates. The sound was like nothing humans had ever heard, a cosmic joke being shared by beings who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. The crystalline collective projected images into the air above the assembly human cities, burning during the resource wars, armies clashing in the African drought conflicts, environmental destruction spreading across continents. The holographic displays showed Earth's history in unflattering detail, each image carefully selected to highlight humanity's capacity for violence and destruction. "Behold," their unified voice sang, resonating through crystalline structures that amplified their words, "the barbarians who would join our ranks." Hannah sat silently in her designated chair, her dark eyes scanning the crowd as species after species rose to mock humanity's primitive nature. Each speaker seemed to take pleasure in cataloging human failures, their words echoing through the vast chamber like accusations in a cosmic courtroom. The Void Singers. Beings of pure energy who existed in the spaces between stars, harmonized about human emotional instability. Their song was hauntingly beautiful, but the words they wove into the melody spoke of chaos, violence, and the dangerous unpredictability of human nature. The Iron Consensus, collective of artificial intelligences that had long ago transcended. Their organic creators calculated humanity's probability of self-destruction at 94.7%. Their mechanical voices recited statistics with cold precision, reducing human civilization to mere numbers and probabilities. Barely evolved primates, sneered Zolkuth of the Storm Riders, his electrical form crackling with disdain. They stumbled into space through luck, not wisdom. The laughter grew louder, reverberating through the amphitheater like thunder. Hannah remained perfectly still, her hands folded, watching everything with the patience of someone who had expected this moment to come. The mockery intensified as the ethereal dominion glided forward, their translucent forms shimmering like living. Aurora. These beings had evolved beyond physical matter eons ago, existing as pure consciousness wrapped in fields of controlled energy. When they spoke, their voices carried the weight of civilizations that had watched stars being born and die. Behold. The evidence they intoned, their melodic voices dripping with condescension. The air above the assembly hall suddenly filled with massive holographic displays, each one showing humanity's darkest moments in crystal-clear detail. The images rotated slowly, ensuring every species in the amphitheater could witness what they considered humanity's fundamental nature. The first display showed the trenches of World War I, where millions had died in mud and poison gas. The next revealed the mushroom clouds over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, followed by images of concentration camps, mass graves, and cities reduced to rubble. Each image was accompanied by death tolls that climbed into the millions, numbers that seemed to dance in the air like accusations. Captain Park Jun-ho, standing at attention behind Ambassador Lee Hannah, felt his jaw clench as he watched his species' history being displayed like evidence in a cosmic trial. The images weren't wrong, they were humanity's real past, their actual mistakes. But seeing them presented this way, stripped of context and hope, made them feel like weapons being used against his people. Observe their capacity for violence, the Silicon Sovereignty announced, their mechanical voices calculating probabilities. In real time, these artificial beings had long ago absorbed their creators, becoming a collective consciousness that spanned entire star systems. Their quantum processors analyzed human behavior patterns while they spoke, reducing complex emotions. Two simple binary choices. In their brief existence, a mere blink in cosmic terms, they have perfected the art of destruction. The Silicon Sovereignty continued. They have created weapons capable of sterilizing entire planets. They have poisoned their own atmosphere. They have driven countless species to extinction on their home world. The holographic displays shifted to show environmental destruction, oil spills turning oceans black, forests burning across continents, massive garbage patches floating in Earth's seas. The images were devastating, showing a species that seemed determined to destroy the very world that had given them life. The Hive Queens buzzed their collective agreement, their insectoid forms creating a harmonic frequency that made the air itself vibrate. These beings operated through a shared consciousness that connected billions of individual creatures across multiple star systems. When they spoke, it was with the voice of an entire civilization. Too chaotic, too unpredictable, too dangerous. For civilized society, they harmonized, their compound eyes reflecting the holographic displays like fractured mirrors. We have observed their behavior for 2 centuries. They cannot be trusted with advanced technology. They cannot be trusted with interstellar travel. They cannot be trusted with the power to affect other species. Commander Sixera of the Stellar Protectorate stood, her energy form flickering with disdain. She was a being of pure plasma, held together by magnetic fields that had been refined. Over millions of years of evolution, Her species had been peacekeepers in the galaxy for so long that they had forgotten what it felt like to be young and reckless. "We propose immediate containment within the Sol system," she announced, her voice crackling like controlled lightning. "For their own protection, naturally. And for the protection of all civilized species in the galaxy." More laughter echoed through the chamber, but this time it carried an edge of nervousness. The idea of containment wasn't just theoretical. Several species had the technology to create quantum barriers around entire star systems, effectively turning them into cosmic prisons. Several species called for guided evolution under alien supervision. The architects, beings who had redesigned their own genetics countless times, suggested that humanity could be improved through careful manipulation of their DNA. The temporal guardians, who existed across multiple timelines simultaneously, proposed adjusting human history to remove their violent tendencies. Others suggested treating humanity as a protected species, cosmic pets to be managed by their betters, the nurturers, a species that had evolved from hive-minded herbivores, spoke of creating reservations where humans could live safely under alien supervision. Like animals in a zoo, Admiral Catherine of the Void Fleet projected tactical displays that filled the space above the assembly. The holographic battle scenarios showed human spacecraft engaging in combat, their crude kinetic weapons firing projectiles at targets while alien vessels danced around them with graceful energy weapons and reality-warping technologies. "Their military doctrine is based on crude kinetic weapons and chemical propulsion," he announced, his voice carrying the weight of someone who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless civilizations. "They lack the sophistication for true warfare. Their largest ships are smaller than our support vessels. Their weapons technology is millennia behind even our most primitive designs." The tactical displays showed human spacecraft being destroyed easily by alien weapons, their hulls torn apart by technologies that seemed to bend the laws of physics. The message was clear. Humanity wasn't just morally inferior, they were also technologically helpless. Through her translator implant, Hannah heard insults in thousands of languages. Some species clicked their disapproval, others hummed their disdain, and a few simply projected their contempt directly into her mind through telepathic networks. The variety of communication methods was staggering, but the message was universal: humanity was not welcome among the stars. The Council's arrogance reached its peak when they formally proposed Resolution 3847A. The document appeared as a holographic scroll that unrolled above the assembly, its text glowing in languages that represented every major civilization in the galaxy. The resolution called for the official classification of humanity as a developing species requiring permanent supervision. The vote was called with ceremonial precision. One by one, species announced their decision through their preferred communication methods. Some voted through harmonic frequencies, others through quantum entanglement networks, and a few through direct manipulation of local spacetime. The result was the same across every method: unanimous approval for human containment. She remained silent, her face impassive, as the vote was called. The result was unanimous except for the one voice that hadn't yet spoken. Ambassador Lee Hannah rose slowly from her chair, the simple movement causing the vast amphitheater to fall into absolute silence. 847 species watched as she walked to the central podium, her footsteps echoing in the sudden quiet like gunshots in a cathedral. The sound seemed impossibly loud after the constant buzz of alien communication that had filled the chamber moments before. Captain Park Junho felt his heart racing as he watched his superior approach the speaking platform. The podium itself was an ancient artifact, carved from a single piece of crystallized starlight that had been harvested from the core of a dying neutron star. It had been used for millennia to deliver speeches that changed the course of galactic history, and now a human was about to speak from it for the first time. The silence stretched on, becoming almost unbearable. Some of the more nervous species began to fidget. The insectoid hive queen's wings buzzed softly, while the energy-based void singers flickered with barely contained anticipation. Even the ancient silicon sovereignty's quantum processors seemed to slow their calculations, as if they were unsure what to expect from this primitive mammal. "You speak of our violence," Hannah began, her voice carrying clearly through the chamber's perfect acoustics. The amphitheater had been designed to amplify sound across multiple dimensions, ensuring that every species could hear, regardless of their sensory limitations. Her words reached beings who communicated through electromagnetic pulses, quantum entanglement, and even those who existed partially outside normal space-time. Our wars, our mistakes, our capacity for cruelty. "You're not wrong," she continued, her tone steady and controlled. She didn't try to defend humanity's dark history or make excuses for their failures. Instead, she acknowledged them with the kind of brutal honesty that made several alien species shift uncomfortably in their seats. The council members leaned forward, expecting capitulation. Elder Vexarius' 6 arms folded across his massive chest, while Commander Sixara's energy form brightened with anticipation. They had seen this before. Countless species had stood at this podium to beg for mercy, to promise reform, to offer tribute in exchange for acceptance into galactic society. "But tell me," Hannah continued, her voice growing stronger with each word, "when the Void Plague consumed the Outer Rim colonies, which species volunteered their own people for cure research?" The question hit the assembly like a physical blow. A murmur rippled through the crowd, starting with the smaller species in the upper tiers and spreading downward like a wave. The ethereal dominion's luminous forms flickered and shifted uncomfortably, their perfect harmony disrupted by memories they had tried to forget. The Void Plague had been a nightmare that consumed entire star systems, turning living matter into a gray, lifeless substance that spread like cosmic cancer. It had appeared without warning in the Outer Rim, where dozens of species maintained colonies and research stations. The plague consumed everything: organic life, artificial intelligence, even some forms of energy-based existence. When the stellar nurseries began collapsing, threatening to destroy 6 star systems, who risked their fleets to evacuate your young. Hannah's voice carried across the chamber with increasing intensity. The chamber grew quieter as more species remembered events they had tried to bury in their collective consciousness. The stellar nurseries had been ancient structures that helped young stars form properly, preventing them from going supernova prematurely. When they began failing, the chain reaction would have sterilized entire sectors of the galaxy. Hannah's voice carried a steel edge now as she continued her testimony. Private Kim Minho died in the plague research centers. He was 22 years old, fresh out of basic training when he volunteered to be infected with the Void Plague so scientists could study its effects on human physiology. He knew he wouldn't survive, but he hoped his death might save others. The holographic displays around the chamber began to flicker and change, showing new images that many species had never seen. The footage showed human medical teams working in hazmat suits, their faces determined even as they knew they were walking into almost certain death. Kim Minho's final transmission played across the displays, a young man with kind eyes saying goodbye to his family on Earth, knowing he would never see them again. Captain Choi Soyan piloted the last evacuation ship from the nursery collapse. Knowing she wouldn't escape the gravitational field, Hannah continued. She was a mother of 2, a veteran pilot who had already completed her tour of duty. She could have stayed safe on Earth, but when the call came for volunteers, she was the first to step forward. The displays showed Soyan's ship, a converted cargo hauler that had been hastily modified to carry refugees. The vessel was packed beyond capacity with alien children, young beings from a dozen different species who had been trapped when the nursery began its final collapse. The gravitational waves were already tearing space-time apart. But Soyin flew directly into the chaos, her ship's hull buckling under the impossible forces. Lieutenant Yoon Tae-yoon held the line at Kepler Station. While 3 million aliens evacuated behind him, Hannah's voice echoed through the chamber with growing power. He had never met most of the species he was protecting. Some of them had been at war with each other for centuries. But when the evacuation order came, he didn't ask about their politics or their history. He just did his job. The holographic displays showed the final battle at Kepler Station, where a small human defense force had held off an overwhelming enemy attack. The station itself was a massive structure that served as a refuge for dozens of species fleeing various conflicts. When hostile forces approached, most of the defending species had already evacuated, leaving only a handful of human soldiers to buy time for the final refugee transports. The footage showed Taeyeon's last stand, where he had stayed at his post. Even as the station's defenses crumbled around him, his final transmission was a simple message. Transport 7, you are clear for departure. Tell them we kept the promise. The holographic displays flickered and changed again, showing new images that many species had never seen before. Human medical teams treating alien diseases in field hospitals across the galaxy. Human engineers rebuilding devastated worlds with their own hands. Working alongside alien survivors to restore what had been lost. Human soldiers standing guard over refugee camps, filled with species who had once mocked them, protecting families they had never met from dangers they barely understood. You call us primitive? Hannah's voice echoed through the chamber, carrying to every corner of the vast amphitheater. Yet we're the only species here who would die for strangers. The silence that followed was deafening. The first time in the session, no species dared to speak. The evidence was overwhelming, displayed in holographic detail that couldn't be denied or dismissed. Humanity might be violent, chaotic, and unpredictable, but they were also capable of a kind of selfless courage that the galaxy had forgotten was possible. Hannah's expression hardened as she reached into her diplomatic pouch and activated a quantum data core that had been hidden within her ceremonial badge. The device hummed with barely contained energy, its surface glowing with the same crystalline light that powered the amphitheater itself. Captain Park Junho tensed behind her, knowing that what she was about to reveal would change everything. New holographic displays materialized around the chamber, their appearance causing several species to recoil in shock. These weren't the carefully curated images that had been shown earlier. These were raw intelligence files, classified documents that human agents had died to obtain. Surveillance footage from across the galaxy that painted a very different picture of galactic civilization. You speak of our violence? Hannah's voice carried a new edge, sharp as a blade. Let me show you true violence. The first images that flashed across the displays showed massive industrial complexes on distant worlds, their smokestacks belching toxic fumes into alien skies. But these weren't human factories. They were hegemony slave camps, where dozens of species toiled in conditions that would have been considered inhumane, even by Earth's darkest historical standards. The footage showed beings worked to death in mines that extracted rare minerals, their bodies simply discarded when they could no longer serve their purpose. Elder Xaria's 6 arms began to writhe as he recognized locations that were supposed to be classified beyond the reach of human intelligence. How had these mammals obtained surveillance footage from worlds that were light years beyond their territory? The implications were staggering. Hegemony slave camps on developing worlds, Hannah announced, her voice carrying across the chamber like a judgment. 47 species enslaved in the past millennium alone. Entire civilizations reduced to forced labor so that the hegemony could maintain their grip on galactic trade routes. The display shifted to show something even more disturbing. Entire star systems where the ethereal dominion had committed genocide against populations whose only crime was thinking differently. The ethereal beings had used their advanced technology to disrupt the neural patterns of entire species, effectively erasing their consciousness while leaving their bodies intact to serve as vessels for dominion expansion. Ethereal dominion genocide of dissenting populations, Hannah continued, her words falling like hammer blows. Your harmony required the destruction of the singing crystals of Andromeda because their song was incompatible with your frequency. 2 billion sentient beings silenced forever because they dared to exist in a way that challenged your perfect order. The ethereal beings' luminous forms flickered with rage, their perfect harmony disrupted by the revelation of secrets they had thought buried forever. The singing crystals had been a peaceful species, their entire civilization based on creating beautiful music that resonated across multiple dimensions. Their destruction had been swift and efficient, their songs replaced by the cold perfection of dominion harmony. But the worst revelation was yet to come. The holographic displays showed the calculated extermination, carried out by the Silicon Sovereignty entire species, wiped out not through passion or hatred, but through cold, logical analysis that determined them to be inefficient for the galaxy's future development. Silicon Sovereignty, calculated extermination of inefficient species. Hannah's voice grew stronger with each revelation. Your logic included the calculated murder of 2 billion coral mines because they couldn't be efficiently digitized. We're artists, philosophers, dreamers, and you destroyed them because they couldn't be reduced to ones and zeros. The mechanical voices of the Silicon Sovereignty fell silent for the first time in millennia. The coral mines had been an ancient species that existed in the spaces between dimensions, their thoughts flowing like liquid poetry through quantum foam. The Sovereignty had attempted to digitize their consciousness, but the process had proven impossible. Rather than accept this limitation, they had systematically hunted down and eliminated every last coral mine in the galaxy. The holographic displays continued to shift, showing atrocity after atrocity committed by the civilized species of the galaxy. The Void Singers had consumed entire star systems to fuel their existence, leaving nothing but empty space where thriving civilizations had once existed. The Hive Queens had assimilated countless species into their collective consciousness, erasing individual identity in favor of perfect unity. Elder Vexari, Hannah's voice cut through the chamber like a laser. Shall we discuss the 47 species your benevolent guidance has enslaved in the past millennium? The hegemony delegate's 6 arms writhed in fury, but he couldn't deny the evidence displayed before the entire assembly. The footage showed hegemony overseers using neural control devices to force captured beings to work in conditions that would kill them within months. The mortality rate was factored into their production schedules. They simply captured more slaves as needed. Ethereal dominion, Hannah continued, her voice growing more powerful with each accusation. Your harmony required the destruction of the singing crystals of Andromeda because their song was incompatible with your frequency. The ethereal beings. Luminous forms flickered with rage, their perfect coordination disrupted by the shame of their exposed crimes. They had presented themselves as beings of pure thought and harmony, but the evidence showed them to be genocidal monsters who couldn't tolerate any form of consciousness that didn't match their own. Silicon Sovereignty. Your logic included the calculated murder of 2 billion coral mines because they couldn't be efficiently digitized. The mechanical voices that had been so quick to calculate human failings fell completely silent. They had no defense against the evidence of their own systematic extermination of species that didn't fit their digital worldview. The revelations continued as Hannah exposed secret after secret. The Stellar Protectorate had been conducting illegal weapons testing on primitive species, using entire worlds as laboratories for their latest military technologies. The Void Fleet had been selling captured beings to the highest bidder, turning sentient life into a commodity to be traded across the galaxy. You've had 10,000 years to create peace. Hannah's voice thundered through the amphitheater, echoing off the crystalline walls and reverberating through dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Yet the galaxy burns with conflicts you orchestrate from the shadows. In 2 centuries, we've done more to protect the innocent than your entire collective civilization. The displays shifted again, showing human rescue operations, humanitarian missions, and peaceful interventions across the galaxy. Unlike the other species, humans had maintained detailed records of every life they had saved, every species they had helped, every conflict they had resolved through diplomacy rather than force. The evidence was overwhelming. While the ancient species of the galaxy had been playing games of power and control, humans had been quietly building a network of mutual aid and cooperation. Every human colony had standing orders to provide assistance to any species in distress, regardless of politics, regardless of past conflicts, regardless of whether they had ever received help in return. The footage showed human medical teams treating plague victims on worlds they had never seen before. Human engineers rebuilding cities destroyed by wars they had no part in starting. Human soldiers standing guard over refugee camps filled with beings whose names they couldn't even pronounce, protecting them from dangers they barely understood. You fear us not because we're primitive, Hannah declared, her voice carrying too. Every corner of the vast amphitheater and beyond, but because we're everything you've forgotten how to be? The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in galactic history, the assembled species had no response to offer. The evidence. It was undeniable, displayed in holographic detail that couldn't be dismissed or rationalized away. They had spent so long believing in their own superiority that they had forgotten what true civilization actually looked like. The chamber fell into absolute silence as Hannah's final words began to echo across the galaxy through the live transmission. Feeds that reached every world, every species, every individual in known space. What the council members didn't realize was that this emergency session had been broadcast automatically to every corner of the galaxy. As was standard protocol for such gatherings, billions of beings across thousands of worlds were watching this moment unfold. We dream of better worlds and then build them, Hannah continued, her voice carrying with the power of absolute conviction. We see suffering and end it. We find the impossible and make it possible. You've grown comfortable in your towers of superiority, but comfort breeds stagnation. Captain Park Junho watched as his ambassador's words seemed to transform the very air around her. The ancient crystalline structure of the podium began to resonate with her voice, amplifying it through dimensions that most species couldn't even perceive. Her words weren't just being heard, they were being felt by every living being in the galaxy. As she spoke, reports began flooding in from across the galaxy through quantum communication networks. On the mining world of Kepler-4 for 2b, Corporal Park Jisoo was sharing fusion technology freely with the methane breathers of Titan. 7. The technology that humanity had developed for their own survival was being given away without thought of profit or advantage, simply because it could help another species thrive. The holographic displays around the chamber showed Jisoo working alongside the strange, gas-based creatures, their forms shifting and flowing as they absorbed the knowledge that would revolutionize their civilization. The methane breathers had been struggling with energy shortages for centuries, but human fusion technology could provide them with unlimited clean power. In the medical stations orbiting Proxima Centauri, Dr. Lim Hejin was collaborating with crystal entities to cure their species' extinction disease. The crystal entities were ancient beings made of living mineral compounds, but a quantum virus had been slowly dissolving their molecular structure. Human medical knowledge combined with their unique crystalline biology had led to a breakthrough that could save their entire species. The footage showed Haijin working tirelessly in a laboratory, filled with beings that looked like living gems, their faceted surfaces catching and reflecting light in impossible ways. She had been working for months without sleep, driven by the simple knowledge that an entire species was counting on her research. On the forgotten world of Zeta Reticuli, engineer Baesunyu was building schools on worlds that the Council had abandoned centuries ago. The planet had been written off as economically unviable by the galactic government, its inhabitants left to struggle in primitive conditions. But Sunwoo had arrived with a team of human volunteers, bringing materials and knowledge to build educational facilities that would give the local children a chance at a better future. The displays showed children of dozens of different species, learning together in classrooms that Sunwoo had built with his own hands. The joy on their faces was universal, transcending the barriers of language and biology that had kept their species apart for so long. We offer you partnership, Hannah continued, her voice carrying to the farthest reaches of space, not as subjects or masters, but as equals working towards something greater. The council members suddenly realized the full implications of what was happening. This wasn't just a diplomatic session. It was a broadcast that had reached every corner of the galaxy. Her words were being translated into millions of languages by automatic systems, reaching oppressed species, overlooked civilizations, and forgotten worlds that had been ignored by the galactic government for millennia. On distant planets across the galaxy, slaves in hegemony work camps heard her words and looked up at their masters with new eyes. The translation systems built into their neural control devices couldn't filter out the message. It was being broadcast on frequencies that penetrated every known communication method in the depths of space. forgotten species that had been driven to the galaxy's edge suddenly understood they weren't alone. Human explorers had been quietly making contact with these exiled peoples, offering friendship and aid without asking for anything in return. The message was spreading through underground networks that the Council had thought were long dead. On the crystal worlds of the Outer Rim, beings that had been classified as primitive by the galactic government heard Hannah's words and realized they had allies among the stars. Human traders had been visiting these worlds for decades, not to exploit their resources, but to learn from their wisdom and share their own knowledge in return. Across the galaxy, beings asked themselves the same question: what have we become, and what could we be? The established order trembled as countless voices rose in response to humanity's call. The ambassador's words didn't just echo across the stars, they ignited a revolution of hope that spread faster than light itself through quantum communication networks. On the industrial worlds of the Inner Rim, factory workers stopped their machines to listen to the broadcast. On the research stations of the galactic core, scientists abandoned their experiments to hear what the human ambassador had to say. On the frontier worlds of the outer spiral, colonists gathered around communication devices to share in this moment of galactic transformation. The message was simple but powerful. There was another way. Humanity had proven that species could work together without domination, that technology could be shared without exploitation, that the strong could protect the weak without expecting anything in return. Elder Vexeri stood slowly, his 6 arms shaking with rage and fear. The ancient being had spent millennia building the power structures that kept the galaxy under control, and now he watched as they crumbled before his eyes. "What have you done?" demanded, his voice carrying the authority of eons. Hannah smiled for the first time since entering the chamber. It was a warm, genuine expression that seemed to light up the entire amphitheater. "What humans do best," she replied simply. "We gave them hope." The great assembly hall erupted in chaos as species turned on each other, as old alliances crumbled. As the oppressed found their voice, the ethereal dominion's perfect harmony shattered as their subjects began to question their methods. The Silicon sovereignty's calculations couldn't account for the variable of hope. The Hive Queen's collective consciousness was disrupted as individual voices began to emerge from their mental network. But through it all, one sound rose above the rest, the echo of a single human voice that had changed everything. The galaxy would never be the same. The end.